Nomad. I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you. Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre. America, land of the rich, gorgeous, and spotlessly clean. Mom had always tuned into the bold and the beautiful, Dynasty, Baywatch, and Remington Steele. So naturally, the America of those shows was the America of my fantasy. Then, in May of 1995, shortly before I turned 13, I arrived for a vacation with mom in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It was my first trip abroad. I didn't see any mentions and I had to search hard for perfectly blown out hair and haute couture fashion. It wasn't like the glamorous television shows at all. The people in the mid sized American city were just normal people living in normal houses, doing normal things. Still, it felt a universe away from India. The population of India is more than 4 times the population of America. Yet America has almost 3 times the physical space, which meant that as seen through my teenage eyes, American space was mind blowing. There was so much distance between things, and with organized system to everything, the neighborhoods, the traffic, the way people stood in line. Where was the poetic chaos? Energetic commotion of a crowded country that's always in motion, always alive. Mom and I had traveled to Cedar Rapids to visit her youngest sister, Kiran Mathur, a computer engineer who lived there with her husband, Amitabh, and their daughters, Priyam, age 10, and Pooja, age 3. Disappointment in the real America, as opposed to the TV version of it, changed a few days after we arrived. My aunt Kiran, or Kiran Masi, Masi translates as like mother, asked if I wanted to check out an American high school and I jumped at the offer. I couldn't get over how huge the buildings were at John F. Kennedy High School. The vastness of the gymnasium, cafeteria, auditorium, and playing fields seemed absolutely luxurious to me. Accustomed as I was to generally smaller spaces and 50 or 60 students in a classroom, the theatre and music program sounded amazing. And kids actually changed classroom for the different classes at my school and many others in India. Our teachers came to us. Given the number of students, it was easier to have the instructor go from room to room than to have kids flooding the halls between classes. Overall, it seemed to me that the kids here were trusted with more responsibility and allowed more independence. And I had already gotten a taste of that at La Martiniere and loved it. So, when my aunt asked me if I might like to go to high school in Cedar Rapids, I considered the question against the backdrop of students bustling through the hallways to and from their classes. The lockers were painted in cheerful blocks of color. The school mascot, the Kennedy Koja, roared at me from the walls of the hallway. Sports trophies glistened in their glass cases. No one was wearing uniforms. I blinked. Seriously? No uniforms? Kids can dress however they want. Girls can wear makeup and their hair down. Are you kidding? Yes. Decision made. I couldn't wait to get back to talk to mom about staying in America. Boarding school had made me feel ready to take on the world, so the prospect of being far from home didn't scare me. My life had always been a little nomadic anyway, living with my grandparents early on, moving from city to city due to my parents' army postings, going to boarding school, so attending high school in America felt like it was just the next step in my athletic education. My cousin Priyam had stayed with my mom for 2 years when Kiran Masi was moving to America while I was in boarding school. Wouldn't it be nice if I now stayed with my aunt, who had helped care for me when I was a baby living with my grandparents? Mom said she thought it would be a great opportunity for me and called Dad to see if he'd go for it. After a rational, logical Chopra family conversation, Dad agreed. Let her give it a shot. If I liked it, I could stay. If I didn't adapt, I could come home. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, and so it was decided that I would stay with my aunt and her family and give the US a try. That's how I thought my move to the US came about. Only recently did I discover that wasn't the full story. When I was living in Bareilly, my cousins who had already moved to the state, Sana, Irfan and Priyam, Pooja was too young and so was my cousin Parisa, were writing and telling me how great America was and sending me pictures of themselves dressed in cool American clothes. In my persistent, preteen way, I took to telling mom how much I wanted to live in America too. Of course, I knew that was impossible. My cousin all lived with their parents, but my parents had careers in India that they weren't about to leave. Mother's mother, Nani, told me that if I got good enough grades, maybe my parents would take me on a trip to America. So that's what I thought this trip was, a special vacation as a reward for my handwork in school. Unbeknownst to me, before we arrived in the US, mom had already reached out to her sister Kiran about the possibility of me living with her and attending school in the States. Knowing my independent streak and my love of adventure, mom thought that I might relish the chance to live and study in the States. It would also give my parents time to settle into a new living situation after dad's recent retirement from the army and to establish their new joint private practice. But mom wanted to make sure that going to school in America was what I truly wanted and that I made the decision with open eyes and without feeling any pressure about it. She chose not to include my father in her thought process until she knew whether it was something I was actually drawn to. I would love to have Mimi live with us, Kiran Masi responded when mom asked her. What's three kids instead of two? Then she contacted the local high school to see about getting a student visa for me. So that visit to the high school, it had all been planned in advance. There had even been a conversation with a guidance counselor when it was clear that the possibility of going to school in the States excited me. Mom and Kiran Masi allowed me to think the situation had occurred spontaneously and the conversation my mom then had with my father. Well, let's just say my mom got her way. A note on family member designation for those unfamiliar with them. In Hindi speaking culture, there is a specific term for everyone in the family so you immediately know who's who and exactly how they are related. For instance, in addition to Masi, we have Mosa, which means mother's sister's husband. Mamu means mother's brothers and Mami means mother's brother's wife. Chacha means father's brother and Chachi means father's brother's wife. Dada means paternal grandfather and Dadi means paternal grandmother. Though we called our paternal grandparents Pitaji and Mataji because that's what my parents called them. Nana means maternal grandfather and Nani means maternal grandmother, and so on and so forth. For someone new entering a large extended family, as many Indian families tend to be, these designations are incredibly helpful in making sense of all the relationships. Though the setup had been engineered, the actual decision to stay in the States to attend school had not, and it was the first time I was given primary responsibility for a major decision about my life. Right before my mother left to head back to India, she said, Now that you are going to live away from me, remember what we discussed about the pros and cons. Remember that this was your decision, and if you change your mind, Dad and I will always be there to come back home to. You can call us from anything, and whatever happens, try your hardest so that you will always know you gave it to your best shot. Short version. Own your choices, or as my mother must have told me hundreds of times growing up, have courage of conviction. Iowa, deep in the American Midwest and known to be conservative both politically and socially, was incredibly welcoming and accepting for a girl like me. Immigrant, brown, different. Different hair, different skin, different accent, different clothes, different food. The ways I was different seemed endless. I was acutely aware of my status as other. But it wasn't so much that other students considered me other. It was that I did. I had never been more aware of my ethnicity than when I left my own country and moved to America. The most obvious way I was other was my skin. And even in India, there were issues having to do with skin color. Girls like me who were darker were often referred to pejoratively as dusky. I wasn't different at home. Here, I was, even though there was no unkindness associated with that status yet. I acclimated to John F. Kennedy High School with a minimum of difficulty and spent the 8th grade falling in love with hot dogs, hot pockets, and a hot boy named Seth. Though I am sure he and his green hair didn't know that I existed. Part of what may have made it relatively easy to acclimate was that I didn't have to worry about keeping up academically. Whereas the American school year generally goes from August or September to May or June, the Indian school year generally goes from April to March with summer and winter breaks. I had entered 8th grade back in Bareilly earlier that spring, and I would now be re-entering it in Cedar Rapids. The more important reason, though, is that when I was in school in the US in the 90s, many Indian schools were far more rigorous than their American counterparts. Or at least, that was my impression. On day one of advanced math class in Cedar Rapids, for example, I discovered we were to be studying quadratic equation, which was going to make the class awfully easy for me, since I had learned them the year before when I was handed a scientific calculator for an exam in that class. I didn't understand what I was being tested for if I could use a calculator. I was a good student in India, but I was never one of the best in my class. Here I earned that distinction quickly. Like math and other subjects that I was comparatively advanced in, the social aspect of this huge new school were harder for me. One of the most difficult adjustments I had to make, believe it or not, was figuring out the food that was being served in the big noisy cafeteria. At my previous school, I had always brought my lunch from home as in the norm of India. Knowing that I had been sheltered and protected at home as most middle class Indian children are, Kiran Masi wanted me to learn the independence that kids in the United States have. So, like my parents in America, she gave us money to buy our lunches at school. For the first few days, I simply watched what the other kids did, how they each got a tray, went through the line, pointed at what they wanted, and took their food to a table to sit with friends. Negotiating the lunch lines and trying to quickly figure out the unrecognizable foods that were being offered by the cafeteria staff was overwhelming at a time. Being cool and unfazed was very important to my teenage self, afraid of looking stupid or worse, of calling further attention to the fact that I was an outsider. I decided I'd just buy chips from the vending machine and eat them in the girls' bathroom. After about a week, I got the courage to venture back into the cafeteria. I had made one friend by then who, like me, existed without status, not popular, not invisible, so I went through the line, got food on my tray, and sat down at a table with her and a few other kids. So far, so good. As I was finishing my meal, I started to eat what I had thought was my dessert. A white mound of vanilla ice cream that oddly hadn't started to melt. I gazed when what I put into my mouth was not cold, sweet, and delicious, but warm and gloppy mashed potatoes, I was told as I choked down the first bite. Moments later, when the creamy, buttery mouthful actually registered on my taste bud, mashed potatoes had a new fan. From then on, they were on my plate every time they were offered. Still are. Food confusion was a frequent occurrence at the time, whether it was because something new looked like something familiar or because the name made no sense to me. Imagine my bewilderment when it came time to try buffalo wings. There were other things to get used to too. When I was living with my parents, I had been driven to school for the most part. It would have been hard for Kiran Masi to drive me. She had a job and three children to look after, and mornings were busy. The school district provided busing to Priyam school. My new school was within a mile of our house, and so busing wasn't available. Still, it was too far to walk. Masi thought it would be smart for me to be able to handle myself on public transportation here. So now I was taking a city bus the short distance to the school. Every morning I was given $2 for the bus and $1 for lunch. On the first day of school, Masi rode with me on the bus. This is how you put in the coins and this is how you find a seat. When you sit down, don't engage, just keep your head down and then you get off when you arrive at school. Chores were another big change for me. This is America, Kiran Masi said. You will make your own bed, you will pick up after yourself, you will help to do laundry. We cannot afford to pay people to do these things for us here. Mother had always tried to impress upon me the importance of tidying up after myself in spite of us having a help a large part of my life. I had belligerently ignored her because I knew there was someone to do it for me if I didn't. Here, that wasn't an option, and I have Kiran Masi to thank for keeping after me until I finally learned how to do the course of everyday life and then turned those life skills into habits. I had an amazing school year at John F. Kennedy High School. It wasn't Beverly Hills or Saved by the Bell. My only previous reference to what high school in America was like, but sometimes in felt close. Loved the hubbub in the halls between classes, the cool fashions, and the general feeling of freedom. And I adored participating in the school choir. The director, a soft spoken, encouraging, and at the same time energetic man named Storm Ziegler, who, as of the writing of this book, is still the director of choral activities at the school, nominated me as one of two singers to represent our school in the State Opus Honor Choir Festival in Des Moines. Was indeed an honor and a treat, and I participated so diligently that I think my family knew the alto part of Monteverdi's cantate domino as well as I did. Mr. Ziegler also introduced me to the concept of musical theatre, something I had never heard of before. I knew music and I knew theatre, but I had never seen them combined. I auditioned for a role in nearby production of Fiddler on the Roof, and when I didn't get the part, Mr. Ziegler knew just what to say. It doesn't matter that you didn't get the part this time. Priyanka, you are good at this. We will try for a part in a show again next year and you will get it next year. His faith in me caused me to realize that one failure doesn't mean failure. It means you didn't get the part this time. But you can prepare hard for your next opportunity and maybe you will get that one. Or the one after. All these years later, I am happy to know that Mr. Ziegler is still offering musical student at John F. Kennedy High School the same kind of encouragement and wise counsel that he offered to me. The year I spent in Iowa gave me my first experience of a whole winter living with snow. Until then, snow meant throwing snowballs at my dad when we vacationed in Kashmir. Snow for months on end in Iowa was not nearly as glamorous. It meant waking up at 5 a.m. to help Marcy shovel the driveway so she could back the car out and get us to our bus stops in time to catch the bus for school. Hashtag get old fast. At some point during the year, Amitabh Mosa had found a new job in Lincoln, Nebraska, more than 300 miles to the west. He had returned to Cedar Rapids on weekends, but during the week it was Marcy and the three of us girls. Then, in the summer of 1996, Kiran Marcy changed jobs. Her new one was in Indianapolis, Indiana, almost 400 miles to the east. It was decided that she would take a few months to find the right apartment, pack up and move. In order to not uproot us so quickly after the start of the school year, Priyam, Pooja and I were sent to New York City to live with my mother's brother and his family while Marcy settled into the new apartment and her new job. This was not just an example of the commitment to extended family that is seen in most Indian families. It was part of the pattern in our specific family, encouraged by Nani, who was adamant about her daughters having every possible opportunity to further themselves in their careers. If you need time to focus on your studies or establish yourself in a new job, take that time. She impressed upon them. The family will always tend to your children, and the family always had. It's part of the reason I was in America in the first place. My cousins and I arrived in time to start the school year in New York, joining Vimal Mamu, Vimal Mami, and their children, Divya and Rohan, who had just moved from New Delhi to Flushing, Queens. Though taking us in meant there would now be 5 kids and 2 adults sharing their 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment, they welcomed us with big smiles and open arms. It turned out to be a great move. Queens, the largest borough of New York City and the second most densely populated, is one of the most ethnically diverse places in the world, with almost every country and language represented on its street and in its shop and restaurants. Robert F. Kennedy Community High School, where I spent much of ninth grade, was completely multilingual and multicultural. Everyone in Flushing was from somewhere else, so blending into the crowd was effortless. Because of that, I felt a sense of ease, of belonging, that I hadn't realized I had been missing so much. Vanessa Smart, born in Haiti and raised in New York, quickly became my best friend. And we are still in touch. She taught me all sort of things about New York and style, including how to do my hair in tiny braids, a project she enthusiastically embarked on one day after school. Never tried braiding hair as thick as mine though, so it took her far longer than she had imagined. After 2 hours long sessions of watching the painfully slow progress, my clever cousin Divya rolled her eyes and said, "Just make the braids thicker, it will go quicker." So that's what we did. I ended up with a head full of braids that were a mix of super skinny and thick. But it was the first time I had ever had braids and I loved it. And I loved New York. The music, the fashion, the massive laundromats with so many machines, the pizzerias on every corner. I had never seen so many washing machines in one place, and I had never seen pizzas so big. Everything was new, everything was exciting. New York was almost poetic in its frenzy, almost like a global India. I could meet people from China, Australia, Guatemala, Haiti, France, Russia, Greece, the Philippines, and more in this one borough. All I had to do was walk out the front door of my apartment building, and the world was there to greet me. Queens was where I discovered hip hop. Not only did I love Tupac and Biggie, but also the fashion that accompanied the music, hoop, earrings, and puffer jackets, and rollerblades. It was in the Queens that I realized I could be cool if I choose to be. I could be cute if I choose to be. I could be whatever I wanted to be. What a sense of power for a 14-year-old girl. New York was also bursting with culture, history, and fun things to do, and Mamu and Mami wanted to make sure we took full advantage of those offerings. They took us all over the city to places like the Statue of Liberty, the New York Hall of Science, and the Children's Museum. One day, Mamu decided to take Divya, Priyam, Rohan, and me to visit the world famous Museum of Modern Art, or the MoMA as it's known to New Yorkers. Living in Queens as we did, we had to take a bus and two subways to reach the museum. She is located in Midtown Manhattan. I'm sure we viewed all sorts of great works of modern and contemporary art that day, but I only remember one of them, The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. I must have been utterly fascinated by the deep swirls of the color and texture because apparently I stepped right up to this masterpiece of Impressionism and touched it. A nearby security guard swooped in and immediately escorted me, my cousins, and my uncle down the escalator into the huge lobby and out of the building. With all the people staring at us, poor Divya was super embarrassed on that long escalator right down to the first floor, and I was mortified that I was the reason all of us had gotten kicked out. Well, inside though, I was also silently exhilarated. I had touched the starry night. What a story to be able to tell someday. Queens shaped my understanding of America. I had arrived in Cedar Rapids thinking that all Americans looked like the polished, perfect character on television and in the movies, and that all Americans, or almost all of them, were on one skin tone, white. Now I was coming to understand that America doesn't look like any one person. And it definitely doesn't look like any one character in a made up story on TV. New York taught me that you don't have to have the same hair, eyes, skin tone, or language to be an American. It taught me that unless you are one of the native peoples, everyone in this country has come from someplace else. And together, all of those people from some place else have built this country. Next stop, Indianapolis, Indiana. Having moved around so much already, it didn't seem like a big deal when Priyam, Pooja, and I packed up to rejoin Kiran Masi in March of my ninth grade year. Like Iowa, Indiana is in the Midwest and is socially and politically conservative. In other words, it's a world away from diverse, liberal New York. Politics and diversity were the last things on my mind there, though, because Indianapolis is where I met my first boyfriend. His name was Bob. Not really, I'm protecting his privacy here, and we both attended North Central High School where he was in 10th grade. Dating him was definitely a hard flex, and I fell for him in a big way. The guy played varsity football, had a really high GPA, and was everything high school dreams were made of. Great romance consisted mainly of Bob standing outside the door of whatever classroom I was in, out of the teacher's view but in mine. He'd wave at me and make funny faces as we both waited for the class to be over. Then he'd walk me to my next class completely willing, it seemed to be tready on my behalf. We got to the point where we had even hold hands in the hallway. He wrote me notes in his careful, beautiful handwriting. One day he took off the gold chain around his neck and put it around mine. Oh my god, I thought we are getting married. The whole romance took place inside the school because Kiran Masi was not only a brilliant engineer, she was also a brilliant sleuth. She was somehow always magically aware of everything her kids and I were doing, making sure we weren't getting ourselves into any trouble or breaking any of her strictly enforced rules was that dating was absolutely not allowed. The same rule applied to my cousins, but since I was the oldest, 14, to Priyam's 11 and Pooja's 4, it didn't apply to them yet. It was all on me. For a while, I tried to outsmart Agent Kiran in order to talk to Bob on the phone. I used subterfuge techniques once that would make my future Quantico character Alex Parrish proud. Bob would get his sister to call my house so that Masi would give the phone to me, thinking the girl on the phone was my friend. Such tactics were possible in the late 90s before cell phones. Then his sister would hand the phone to Bob, but Marcy was too smart for such tricks. I don't know what made her suspicious, but one evening she picked up the other landline extension. I could hear her lift the receiver even though she tried to be super stealth when she did it, and that was the end of our phone calls. I wasn't giving up that easily, though. In order to spend more time with Bob, I came up with a plan to enroll in summer school classes. I need more credits, I told my aunt, which was actually the truth. This education was a requirement to graduate, but because of all the moving and changing of schools I had done, I still hadn't gotten around to taking it. She agreed so ironically. Sex ed was the class I attended in the mornings, and after which my boyfriend picked me up. He'd drive me to the bus stop near our apartment where I had pretended to have exited the bus. Then I had walked home. Again, Agent Kiran realized something was up. One morning, she waited in the school parking lot until my class was over, and then she followed Bob's car from the school. When I got out at the bus stop and saw her pull in behind Bob, it was clear that the jig was up again. We made yet another plan. I would take the bus home, and Bob would come to the house while my aunt was still at work. One day, Bob and I were sitting on the couch watching television, innocently holding hands and switching channels back and forth between BET and MTV because they had the coolest music, while Boys II Men was playing I Will Make Love to You. Bob inched toward me. I turned to look at him, wondering if it would be that moment, my first kiss. When suddenly, outside the window on the sidewalk below, I saw my aunt making her way up the stairs. She was glancing around furtively as if she didn't want to be seen. I panicked. It was 2 in the afternoon, not her usual 4 o'clock arrival time, and I realized in a flash that there was no way to get him out. As we lived on the third floor of the apartment building, there was only one door. There was also no place to hide him in the 2-bedroom unit. Bob and I ran to my room and shoved him into my closet. "Stay there until I can send her to the grocery store," I said breathlessly. "I will tell her we are out of something, then you can leave." Kiran Masi entered the apartment and walked through it ever so slowly, finding a reason to go into every room, into the living room, into the kitchen, into her bedroom. Despite the air conditioning, a bead of sweat dropped from my brow as I waited for her next move. I sat on my bed with my biology book open, pretending to be studying, pretending that everything was fine, even though it wasn't fine, because my boyfriend was hiding in my closet. She was taking her time, making me wait. Finally, she stood in my doorway. "Open it," she said. She had sniffed us out. Was it Bob's teenage cologne that gave us away? "Open what?" I said in my innocent I didn't do anything wrong voice. "Open your closet." "I can't," I stalled. "You'll be mad at me because it's such a big mess." "Open it now." I was shaking so badly I could hardly stand and walk to the closet. I had never seen my aunt this angry. I opened the closet door and it was a big mess. A boy came out. Pandemonium ensued. Kiran Masi called my mother. It was the middle of the night in India, but she was too upset to care. "I cannot believe that she lied to my face," Masi said. "There was a boy in her closet." When Masi finally handed the phone to me, Mom, half asleep and not as strict as her younger sister, simply asked, "Why did you have to get caught?" From half a world away, I could tell she was rolling her eyes. If I had been living with my more easygoing parents back home in India, I would have had far fewer rules to follow. But because Kiran Masi had been entrusted with my care, she felt the need to be extremely cautious and strict with me. Something I now understand and respect. But back then, not so much. And I think there was another layer too. Masi and Amitabh Mohsa were first generation immigrants, so America was a completely new country and culture for them. They were working 700 miles away from each other in different states so that their kids could have a great education and the prospect of a bright future. I understand now that Masi must have felt enormous pressures, but at the time all I knew was that she was too strict. I have often wondered what my life would have been like if my aunt hadn't so generously welcomed me into her home just before I turned 13. Her big-hearted offer changed my life and put me on the course I am following today. Thank you forever, Masi. Because Kiran Masi was concerned about where my relationship with my older boyfriend was headed and firmly believed we needed to be kept apart, after the Bob in the closet incident, I was sent back to Vimal Mamu and Vibla Mami just before the start of 10th grade. About 5 months after I had arrived in Indianapolis, I didn't mind leaving Masi's strict rules behind, but I was sad to leave my Indiana family, especially lively, funny Priyam, my companion in the small adventures of everyday life, and the perfect audience for all my romantic stories about Bob. Vimal Mamu and Vimla Mami had left Queens and were now living in Newton, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston, so that Mamu could start his medical residency at Beth Israel Hospital in that city. But being exiled from Indianapolis didn't change my feelings for Bob. I was still completely in love with him, and we corresponded by snail mail and email that summer. This was the late 90s, the relatively early days of personal computers and email, and unfortunately, I didn't yet know about clearing my history. You are not supposed to be in touch with this boy. He's bad for you, Mamu said sternly, pointing to his computer screen and the emails to and from Bob he had discovered. Note to self: technology can come back to bite you in the butt if you don't actually know how to use it. But once Mamu had made his disapproval known, he didn't belabor the point. In spite of the distance between my true love and me, I was committed to making the relationship work. Bob and I still wrote letters and postcards to each other, and I continued to email him too. But now from the computer in the school library. Until I discovered that he had started dating my best friend not long after I had left. So much for true love. Bye bye, Bob. Entered Newton North High School at the beginning of 10th grade. There was definitely more of an ethnic and socio-economic mix in Newton than there had been in Cedar Rapids or Indianapolis, though far less than in Queens. I don't think any school anywhere could top Queens on the diversity scale. Navigating a big new high school was always an intimidating prospect, but my teenage self was way more confident than I had ever been before. I had been an honor roll student since I had arrived in the US, and I had become more and more independent. And I had had a boyfriend, so I was surely a woman of the world. Forget the fact that we had hardly kissed. Again, I spent the first few weeks eating vending machine chips for lunch. I just couldn't bear the thought of descending the stairs into the mammoth cafeteria, seeing all the tables filled with pears and cliques. The fact that I was entering the school in 10th grade rather than 9th, when my classmates and I would have been equally new to the school, meant that people had already found their friend groups. I noticed something I hadn't noticed in my 3 previous American schools. Kids of the same ethnicity definitely stuck together. There was very little mixing and overlap. There were so few Indian kids in my school that I felt as if I were the only one, although that may not have been true. Divya was the only Indian in her grade of 550 students. Eventually, I settled in and made friends Luba, Farog, Camille, and we hung out together during the week and sometimes went into Boston on the weekends. Our crew was one of the few integrated ones. Luba is from Azerbaijan, Faro is from Afghanistan, Camille is American, and I am Indian. I got involved in the theatre and with singing programs offered at school. Went ice skating at what was formerly known as the MDC rink, went for runs along the Charles River to and from the IHOP on Soldiers Field Road. Vimla Mami was like a pied peeper of children. She and Vimal Mamu cared for so many of us over the years. Not just me, but my friends, her kids' friends, and her friends' kids too. Even though there were 5 of us living in their 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment, she had an incredible knack for making everything chores, shopping, the routines of everyday life fun. Like Kiran Masi, though Vimla Mami took her responsibility for my safety and well-being seriously, and at 15 I was getting a lot of attention. Too much for my family's liking. Puberty had hit hard since I had arrived in America. Flowing hair, expanding chest, swaying hips, the idea of me with my dark hair flying loose around me as I ran along the river or walked down the street worried her. In her mind, beautiful long hair plus teenage girl plus out alone is equal to attracts too much attention is equal to trouble. When a simple request to tie back my hair didn't work, she tried to scare me into it by reminding me of a folkloric belief widely held in some parts of India. Priyanka, she would plead, if you walk around with loose hair, especially at night, you will be possessed by a churel. Please, please tie back your hair. I had heard of churels, demonic ghost, said to enter a living being through its most vulnerable spot, lose hair, but I wasn't really worried about evil Indian ghost chasing me all the way to America. If Mami had known how I was dressing at school, she wouldn't have been nearly so worried about my hair. Divya and I were all about the fashion in those days, and we had figured out that we could go to the Salvation Army and Walmart and the Limited Express with money from Diwali or Christmas, or that we had saved by skipping lunch and we could buy what we needed to assemble the wardrobe we wanted. Seemed somehow prophetic, artistic, independent. Divya eventually did have a career in fashion, and later, when I traveled to the US for music, she styled me for many years. For me, that meant a lot of tight clothes and high heels, so each morning I left the house in normal jeans and a t shirt with my hair in a ponytail. I granted Mommy's wish at the start of the school day just to make life easier. Once I got to school, I'd head straight to the girls' bathroom, open the backpack I brought with me every day, and pull out something much more stylish. Off came the jeans, on went the tighter, shorter skirts and the heels, the thick coat of lipstick and mascara. The queen of understatement and subtlety I was not. Some things don't change. My locker was my new closet. Spent most of my sophomore year in Newton hanging out with my friends and involved in school music, theatre, and choir, all the while making sure to keep my grades high. The academic component of life wasn't my favorite part, but my ambition was to become either an aeronautical engineer or a criminal psychologist. Vimal Mamu steered me away from the weird field of psychology and toward engineering, saying science is a good thing. All Indians do it. Fine advice. Since I have always been fascinated by science and innovation, and so I needed good grades, everything was great except for one thing. I was getting bullied. Morning after I had pulled my quick change trick in the girls' bathroom, I had have to walk down Main Street, a hallway that ran right through the middle of the school where all the lockers were and where the stairs to the cafeteria were located. Everyone sat and hung out on those stairs between class, and whenever I had to pass by on my way to class, my bullies Jenny, named Shane to protect the not so innocent, ninth grader, and a devoted group of her friends would yell out to me, Brownie, go back to your country. Do you smell curry coming? Go back on the elephant you came on. When the taunt first started, I tried to ignore them. I put my head down and made my way through that section of the hallway as quickly as I could. Then I tried avoiding Jenny and the other hecklers. I stopped taking the school bus because I knew they had be on it. I took different route to classes even though they were longer. I stayed away from where they congregated near the lockers. Sometimes I was alone, sometimes I was with my friends Camille, Luba, and Foro, fellow outsider who were treated by Jenny and her cliques exactly the same way I was. The four of us clung together, an exclusive club unto ourselves, trying to create a sense of being cool and superior in order to combat the battering our egos were taking. Dressed well, and in school we talked to almost no one except one another. It just felt safer that way. As much as I tried to manage the bullying situation and avoid direct conflict with Jenny and her friends, things eventually escalated. I was tired of being called names, having wild things written about me in the bathroom stalls, and getting shoved against locker and buses. I had spoken to my guidance counselor, and although she spent quite a lot of time talking to me about it, trying to be sympathetic, I guess I am not sure how much time she spent talking to Jenny. Nothing much changed. I would hope the situation would be different now, as the dangers of bullying are far better understood, but back then there didn't seem to be any school policy or any repercussion for the offenders. I was hugely relieved when my sophomore year came to an end. I needed some time to recover my equilibrium, and maybe Jenny and her crew needed some time to grow up. And summer meant that it was time to pile in the car and take a family road trip, just like I had done with my parents when I was a child. All of my mom's siblings and their families were included. Kiran Masi and her family and Vimal Mamu and his family were joined by mom's other two sisters, Sufia Masi and Neela Masi, and Parvez Mosa and my cousins Sana, Irfan and Parisa, and we'd take 2 or 3 cars and hit the road. During the years I was in America, we traveled all over, to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, to the Carolinas or to Maine on the East Coast, to the windy city of Chicago on Lake Michigan or Kansas in the Great Plains. Mom and her 4 siblings were so close to one another and raised us 9 cousins as siblings, taking the time and energy to make sure all of us got together regularly and really knew one another. It clearly made a lasting impression on me, as I do that now with my cousins and their kids. Fortunately, The start of my junior year meant the start of bullying again. I had essentially been on my own with the problem for almost a whole year. Divya knew about it in a very vague way, and of course, Camille, Luba, and Foro at school, and my guidance counselor. But I hadn't told my uncle and aunt. Not had I told my parents in our weekly or bi weekly phone calls. I hadn't wanted to involve them in something I thought I should be able to handle myself. My parents had raised me to be someone who finds solution, and since I hadn't been able to find a way to stop the bullying, I was starting to think that my solution was to go back home. The hostility coming at me from out of nowhere for no apparent reason was getting just too hard to process. While I had been happy and self-confident when I arrived in Newton, my self-esteem was now suffering. My parents had taught me that confidence is not a permanent state of being, a piece of wisdom I still believe. It's something you can work to develop and something you have to work to maintain. The taunts and the graffiti and the physical aggression had done their jobs, and no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't maintain my sense of self worth. I started to believe that I was somehow less than those around me. I couldn't sleep, my grades dropped. I have thought a lot about this whole painful period over the years, and long ago I came to the conclusion that I will never know exactly why Jenny and her friends, both black and white, targeted me and my friends. Because we looked and sounded different, I imagine this was a large part of it. What's ironic here is that Newton was so much more diverse than Cedar Rapids and Indianapolis, where my school were largely homogeneous and predominantly white. So why were my friends and I harassed for being different here, where difference hypothetically should have been better understood? Were there other factors contributing to the bullying in Newton? Perhaps there were, perhaps there weren't. I will never know for sure. One call home was all it took. My parents heard my pain, confusion, and complete emotional exhaustion, and my mom was on the next plane with my brother. Living in the US for high school was a decision I will always be glad I made. It brought me closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins, and it opened up a new universe of people from different countries and cultures. The exposure to such an array of distinctly different people broadened my thinking and helped me to interrupt the world more independently. It allowed me to see that I didn't have to be just one way or from just one place. It helped me grow up, and it absolutely influenced my global outlook today. But at that moment, I couldn't appreciate any of those things. My heart hurt. My spirit hurt. I just wanted to be home, protected by my parents in a cocoon of comfort and safety. Mom accompanied me to school to help me clean out my locker, which was really only a formality at the point, since there were no book inside it, just makeup and various wardrobe items. "Where are your school things?" she asked. I shrugged. "I don't need them, Mom. I am smart here in America." Note to self: pride goeth before a fall. Mom shook her head and we had a big laugh. She was always cool about things like that, and she deserved props for it. In times of strife, rather than being judgmental, she is totally supportive of me. Instead of reprimanding me or telling me how something should be done or should have been done, she has always let me find my own way. At the same time, she makes sure I know I can fall back into her protective arms. My dad was like that too. I never heard a "because I said so" in my life. Each of my parents is an example of kind of parent I want to be someday. One who sees their child as an individual, someone to be raised to live their own life thoughtfully, intelligently, independently, and empathetically. That day, as Mom and I stuffed into a backpack what was inside the metal locker, all the bits and pieces of my 13 months in Newton, who I had been and who I was still becoming, it was hard not to feel like I had failed, but slowly, over time, Mom and Dad each helped me to rebuild the confidence I had lost. It was only fitting that Mom was with me again on that final day in Newton North High School. She had been with me when I first made the decision to stay in the US. Over 3 years earlier in Cedar Rapids, and she was there on my as I left a place and an experience that had helped form me. The symmetry felt right to me, as if there were bookends to a chapter of my life I was now closing. 5 days later, we were on a plane heading home.